Hey everyone, I'm Jason Weiser.
And I'm Carissa Weiser.
And you may know us from our award-winning podcast, Myths and Legends, but now we've partnered with Cast Media to create a new podcast called Scoundrel, History's Forgotten Villains, a series that tells the true stories of some of yesterday's most fascinating, forgotten bad guys.
For example, you'll follow the career of Sidney Gottlieb, not only learning that through Sidney and his CIA team, the U.S. literally sanctioned mind control experiments and torture. But the story will open a window allowing you to really feel what Cold War America was like.
Each episode will feature a new villain and a new time period you may not have heard about, but really should.
So if you like crime, evildoers, and the darker parts of history, join us on Cast Media's new podcast, Scoundrel, History's Forgotten Villains, every week, wherever you get your podcasts.
This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Romeo and Juliet, Twelfth Night, and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. I was playing small roles in all of the productions and understudying larger roles. My mother was planning to come that summer to see us.
That's Robert Beseda. He's 70 years old with short white hair. His eyes crinkle in the corners when he smiles. Robert is retired now, but he used to teach acting. He was the assistant dean of drama at the University of North Carolina. Almost half a century ago, in the summer of '74, Robert got his first big break as a stage actor.
I was at the American Shakespeare Theater in Stratford, Connecticut, when this all happened. It was my first professional job.
Then he got a phone call from his dad's best friend, this guy named Ed.
But Ed called me and said, Robert, I think you should come home. And I guess that's when I knew it was pretty serious.
Robert's mom, Von Beseda, a teacher, was being held hostage in the prison library at the Walls Unit. So Robert flew home, back to Huntsville, the small Texas town where he was born and raised.
Well, nothing like this had ever happened at the prison. I grew up in that town. Most of the people I knew either worked for the college or worked for the prison. And we didn't think of the prison as, a prison. It was just one of the places where everybody worked. And I saw prisoners all over the place. I lived a 5-minute drive from the prison.
Ed picked up Robert at the airport in Houston and drove him to the prison. The families of the hostages were all waiting in the lobby of the administration building, which sat across the street from the Walls Unit. The library offices were equipped with phones, allowing hostages to call their loved ones.
Hello?
Roberto!
Howdy.
How are you?
Well, I'm fine. Just it seemed like about 15 minutes ago I was getting ready to put my makeup on and do Romeo and Juliet.
Well.
We just zooped down here without any trouble.
Well, that's good.
How are you?
Real good.
Yeah?
Yeah. I've had some low points.
Can imagine.
But I've had some high points, and everybody's been, Fred and the others have all been real nice. It's just kind of like being in a hotel, only we sleep on the floor.
It's not quite as comfortable.
No. No. But anyway, they have been real nice. And so we've had some real tense moments, but so far we've gotten over them.
Mm-hmm.
And all they want is get out of the country.
Von Beseda had always been the life of the party. The way Robert describes his mom, you just wanted to be around her.
She was bubbly, and she was good at making people laugh. She liked to laugh. She had a lot of energy. She had a lot of friends. My parents were also great dancers. They were like, out of a Elvis Presley movie where he'd be twirling her around and she'd be shooting between his legs and lifting her up. Everybody would just watch them with enormous delight. And I, of course, was perfectly humiliated.
As for Vaughn, she followed in her mom's footsteps and became an educator.
My mom was a school teacher up until, I am told, the day I was born. By the time my sister and I were grown up, she was kind of bored and wanted something to do. And that's when she applied for a job to teach at the Texas State Prison. And I am told she loved the job.
Robert saw another side of Vaughn when she was taken hostage during inmate Fred Carrasco's siege of the prison library.
Because my mom was a little silly and a little ditzy, and the first time I heard her speak, and I think she must have been speaking to my dad, and I was in on the call, I didn't recognize her voice because she seemed so sort of calm and sure and sort of focused. My mother was so involved with taking care of affairs inside that library, like making sure everybody got their dinner orders correct. It was obvious that she was functioning as herself in that horrible environment.
Today is Steve's birthday, and we all wanted to get him a birthday cake.
Steve, how?
Steve Robinson.
You might remember Steve as one of the inmates taken hostage during the 1974 Huntsville prison siege.
My husband's across the street over there, and I just thought, well, if I could get in touch with him, he could run to the bakery and get one.
Yes, ma'am. I'll go ahead and get the officials here to get a cake for him and send it up there.
Oh, well, you going to do it then?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okie dokie.
Vaughn was more than a one-woman birthday committee. She projected a calm and casual air in her interviews with news reporters.
This is Yvonne Bessida.
How are you today, Miss Bessida?
Oh, excuse me. I was just eating some ice cream.
Okay, I don't want to interrupt your meal.
I'm doing just fine. Well, we've had some very tight moments, and we've had some delightful moments.
What kind of delightful moments have you
I
had?
was going to say, I wouldn't say exactly delightful.
Is that the right word you want to use?
But we have respect and for Fred, and he's has treated us like ladies. And every once in a while, there's a wrong word or something that is said, and they get kind of uptight, which we've just been under pressure, and we, don't mean anything about it.
On the other hand, she reserved her anger for prison director Jim Estelle for his seeming unwillingness to meet the hostage-taker's demands to be released from prison.
Honest to God, everyone thought you were a man. And little by little, we can see how you are shrinking.
It's all right, Miss Bessida. Just take it easy.
After her testy exchange with Director Estelle, Vaughn cooled back down when talking to her son, Robert.
Mr. Estelle probably thinks I'm an idiot woman. I've called him. I've been hysterical several times, trying, and all he would say, I understand. But I kept telling him he didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
What did he not understand?
I don't think he doesn't understand the situation. I mean, if he did, I think, I know they have policies and so forth, but, rules are written to be bent, too.
Yeah.
And so, I learned that a long time ago when I used to say I'd never let you or Claudia do something, and I've eaten those words many times, but I quit saying it. So, I'm not going to say that anymore. But we're hoping and praying that everything's going to turn out for the best.
Yeah, well, we are too.
So all we can do is wait and see, and I hope that TDC will come around to some of the things, and so I just hope everything will turn out real nice.
I'm here, and we're all here, and we're praying.
I love you, and I've thought about you many times, and
as soon as this is over, you're going to have to come up and visit me.
Well, I was planning to come around the first part of August.
Well, I figure that after this is all over, you rate a vacation, don't you?
Yeah. I think I could. I could take one.
Vaughn must have been ready for that vacation, and she would have loved to see her son, Robert, on stage at the American Shakespeare Theater. For now, held captive in the prison library, she waited. From Imperative Entertainment, I'm Wes Ferguson. This is Standoff.
That old white-haired judge in Dallas didn't pay my story no mind, taking me down to Huntsville. I'm bringing in a load of time. They caught me on a caper that I planned for days and proved everything I'd done. I'm on my way to Huntsville, but I'm looking for a chance to run.
The Disgraceland podcast tells the insane true crime stories of music's most famous on their darkest days. This is an uncensored, immersive look at the lives and true crimes of the biggest musical icons in modern history. Stay tuned to the end of this episode to hear a preview of Disgraceland's newest season.
This is Chapter 9. Don't rock the boat.
She could get worked up about things.
Here's Robert again, talking about his mom. Like all of us, Vaughn Beseda was complicated.
When I say worked up, what do I mean? I guess I mean that it was easier for her to be concerned about people, and that if they were being taken care of and what the needs were.
Even as a hostage, her life threatened by gun-waving criminals, it's like Vaughn was more preoccupied by stuff happening outside the prison walls, like her daughter Claudia's college cheerleading outfit, which needed alterations.
First thing, tell Claudia to go to Miss Williams and try on her...
I'll talk with Miss Williams.
Cheerleading costume, uniform. Okay, Claudia? Ma'am? I know the cheerleading outfit. Yeah. Well, y'all take care of yourself.
I got everything under control.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Okay.
I trained you right.
I got so much food at the house, I tell you.
Well, we had fried chicken today.
And yet, as the hostage crisis dragged on, first for days, then for a week and a half, something had to give.
It was the day when there was was it an electrical storm or something, and they lost electricity in the prison, that everything turned dark. It took an ominous turn. It was August, and they had no air conditioning, and they were in a windowless building. We knew something late that afternoon was happening, because they ushered all of the families of the hostages into separate offices. And you could see lots of activity going on, lots of guards, people coming and going.
The stalemate had gone on too long. Somehow, the trio of inmates who'd garrisoned themselves in the third-floor library had to be lured outside.
Authorities promised inmate Fred Carrasco an armored car so he could flee the prison with 2 other convicts and 4 hostages. As the car was being parked inside the prison, firemen were setting up high-pressure hoses. Their plan was to disable the convicts with streams of water in hopes of avoiding gunplay.
Vaughn was inside the mobile shield, the so-called Trojan taco, or Trojan horse, when the prison attack squad blasted it with the high-pressure hoses.
They had to get them out of there. And what they thought up, as soon as that thing came, the Trojan horse came out of there, they'd hit it from all angles with powerful water. It would topple, and everyone would go down. But that's not what happened, did it? If the fire hose hadn't burst, it might very well have worked. I don't know. I try not to think about that.
Prison authorities said one of the hoses ruptured, the convicts opened fire, and officers returned it. When it was over, Carrasco and another inmate, Rodolfo Dominguez, were dead, and so were two of their female hostages.
Vaughn Beseda and Judy Stanley, a prison librarian, were the two hostages who didn't survive the escape attempt. Their captors shot them at point-blank range. Ben Aguilar was among the first to see the bodies.
It affected me in a way for a long time, too. I couldn't get that picture out of my mind, especially that lady, that Mrs. Beseda, that was the one that we had to take loosened from that guy. And evidently he shot her in the chest. But I remember seeing that. I thought that was horrible. It was a .357 Magnum that he shot her with, what a shot like that could do. It was not a very pretty picture.
Meanwhile, Robert and his family were still waiting for news inside a prison office. Robert was hoping for the best, that his mom would soon be coming home, safe and sound.
And then after it happened, Reverend Pickett came in the room and said, "I'm sorry, Buster. She didn't make it." And of course, the room erupted with screams and crying. Then after that, we collected ourselves and got into our various cars. I remember my sister and I were in Peggy's car.
Peggy was Vaughn's best friend.
She had a great big Cadillac, like all Texas ladies liked to have back then. And we drove, and driving from the prison to my parents' house seemed like it was happening in slow motion, almost as if we were floating in air. Don't rock the boat, baby, rock the boat. And I remember that song playing on the radio as the car just sort of floated home. And by the time we got there, there were people from all over town. There were cars everywhere. There were people in the front yard. There were people in the backyard. And we walked into the house, and my father's sister, who actually raised him because my father was the youngest of 9 and she was the eldest of the sisters, and she actually raised my dad, was standing there, and other members of family, friends and family were there, and she had a forced smile on her face. And I was the first person to speak, and I said, I think I screamed, "She didn't make it." And then I fell to the floor and I slammed my fist into the floor and I sprained my wrist. And then Dad came in. He was crushed. He was a broken man. Leading up to the funeral, one is so busy being the host to grief because so many people came to see us. And of course, it was such a big news story. And the press were all out, wanting to get pictures of us and interview us. And things like that.
In front-page articles on the Huntsville siege, the newspapers kept publishing Vaughn's employee photo, a mugshot.
We didn't like the photo they were using, so we went out in the front yard with a framed photograph of my mother, saying, "We wish you guys could use this picture," thinking, of course, that they would just take a photograph of the picture of my mother. But of course, they took photographs of my sister and I holding the picture. So then all the papers were filled with these sad photographs of my sister and I holding the picture of our mother, which was not what we intended at all.
The siege made national news. The final shootout landed on the front page of the New York Times. Top story. Robert still has a copy. Jim Estelle, the director of the Texas prison system, reiterated the waiver that all employees sign when they're hired by the prison. If you're taken hostage, you're on your own.
This is one of the meanest days that anyone ever spent in public service. The results of this, under the circumstances, are the very best I'm convinced that we could have hoped for, considering the people that held our people hostage. I think it's important that you understand that at no time was any thought given to the granting of any illegal freedom to any captor. No hostage taken through any gate of any prison can be considered anything but death.
Novella Pollard and Ann Fleming, two of the hostages who survived the siege, were in attendance at Judy Stanley's memorial service. The press was there too.
And the surviving hostages have supported prison officials for how they handled the incident, declining to criticize the violent way the ordeal ended. In his eulogy, the Reverend Carroll Pickett made it clear such criticism would be out of place.
This Stanley family is here today to tell you that unfair criticisms and second guessings have no place in this city, in this state, or in this nation. They want you all to know that men must do certain things, and women must do certain things, and people like Judy Stanley must be willing to die if peace and life and joy is to exist in this world.
Hostage Ann Fleming was a librarian and a Sunday school teacher at the Baptist church just 1 block from the prison. She'd been handcuffed to the outside of the mobile shield during the botched escape and lived to tell about it.
I prayed for those people inside that machine because I knew they were the ones who were going to die. And I knew that they had said that if there's any gun play, that they would pull the trigger on them, and kill them instantly. And that's what I've tried to find out ever since I've been out, as to who killed who.
There were still questions. Lots of questions. But over time, things in Huntsville went back to normal. Father O'Brien healed from the bullet wounds to his arms and chest. He returned to work as the prison chaplain. In fact, nearly all the surviving hostages went back to work at the prison. Linda Woodman, the librarian everyone admired for keeping her cool under pressure, eventually became the warden of a prison for women in Central Texas. And Jack Branch went back to teaching at the Walls unit.
It haunts you sometimes, not now though, but not like it used to be. I always think about it, get scared. I try not to think about it throughout the day. Sometimes at night you wake up dreaming about it, and it haunts you.
For Jack, in a weird way, something good came out of surviving the siege.
That if I could go through that, I could go through anything. I could survive that, so that gave me encouragement when I would look back at it,
To this day, Jack's son, Ray, still wonders how the 11-day ordeal affected his dad. Being tied up, a gun in your face, bullets flying by, people dying. You don't come out of that an unchanged person.
See, that's the thing, because I really don't know, he's always been pretty secretive about that, so he didn't want nobody to talk to him about it, so we didn't talk to him about it. And so, hence, I don't know a lot about how he felt right after, except for that first minute when we got him from back there. A couple days later, he was just back to normal, back to his old self, you know. Because he used to have a garden out here, so he would just get out there and get lost in riding up and down on a tractor. That's what he liked to do. And golf. You know. So he did plenty of that. Whatever he wanted to do, that's what he did, you know. And my mom wasn't going to sweat him because of what he had just went through, you know. Because she would get mad. He'd be gone, get up early in the morning, leave by 8 and be home by 7, you know, right before it's dark. He's a pretty even keel guy, you know. He never got too high or too low. Now that was the veneer he showed us. He tried to maintain his even cool, and so he's like a jigsaw puzzle, man. His clues pop up here and there, and still, to this day, clues will pop up here and there and stuff, and things you never would have thought that had happened to him. Then he'll say something like, whoa, you know, it blows you away. 10 years later, 20 years later, that happened to him.
Ray's grandma lived near the prison, so he drove past the Walls unit all the time. He swore that he would never go to work there. But jobs were hard to come by in Huntsville. So Ray applied to be a guard. And wouldn't you know it, practically his first day of training, he ended up in the education building, right where the library was.
My grandmother, my mom's mother, lives up that way, over there on that side of town. So yeah, we had to go by there every day. That's why I thought I would never work there. Before I got a job there, I'm like, I would never work there. I ended up working there in that very unit too. I never did think they would put me there. They put me right there. When we walked up that ramp, I was like, wow, you know. And I was trying to not tell anybody about that, you know, anybody that was in my class, unless they were from here and knew me. But I didn't tell people that it happened to us and stuff. But it was pretty difficult, but I needed the money. You know, had to work. And then, you know, people try to ask you stuff, and I would tell them my dad doesn't like to talk about it. And I'd crack a joke and try to distract them from asking me stuff, you know. It was rough, though. Going by there, still rough, even though I worked in it, because, like you said, things will never be the same after. They were never the same after that. Never the same.
As for Robert's mom, Elizabeth Yvonne Beseda, age 47, she was buried in the Oakwood Cemetery, surrounded by East Texas pines, just half a mile from the Walls unit.
Have you ever seen her tombstone? I grew to sort of regret what it says on it, because I thought it was a little presumptuous of us to put it there. But it's that quote from the Bible, the greatest love is shown when a person lays down his life for a friend. But when the minister said it at her funeral, it meant a great, great deal to us.
And it was true. Robert's mom had volunteered to remain a hostage. She put her life on the line, staying with her captors so the others could go free. She made the ultimate selfless act.
On one level, I sure wish she hadn't. On another level, that was her nature. And I have to say, her destiny. Yeah, you know, stuff like this does happen. I believe that there are things that people are meant to do if they find themselves in that situation. And I think that's the path she chose to take. From the very beginning, you know, we had to call her a hero, and she was. But it was a lot easier just to say that than really understand it and allow it to sink in for what it was. My dad never really could get over. It hit him hard, and he never got over that. It just hurt too much.
Robert grieved for his mom in his own way. A long time passed before he realized he needed help.
Several years after this whole thing happened, I went into therapy to even start to admit how angry I was, which is that stage of dealing with death that I evidently chose not to deal with until life was becoming pretty difficult for me. Yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about my mother, as I'm sure you understand.
Although he doesn't talk about her much, memories of his mom are never far from mind.
It isn't all that difficult to dredge them up because they're right under the surface, you know. And I will say this, I'd say for the first 10 to 15 years after my mother died, from time to time, it would all come welling up inside me and I'd cry. And at the oddest times and places, you know, taking a shower, driving in the car. But in, I'd say, the last 20 years or so, I haven't let myself go to the place that, or it isn't necessary, I'm not sure which, that brings back the hurt and the pain. But right now, I'm feeling better because I did it. I'm feeling a little bit as if I've allowed something to happen that needed to happen.
Coming up next, dueling autopsies as a mystery deepens. Fred Gómez Carrasco, orchestrator of the 1974 Huntsville prison siege, died on the concrete ramp leading down from the third-floor prison library. Prison officials and the local justice of the peace were quick to announce his cause of death.
A final autopsy report on the 11-day siege said today Fred Carrasco, the convict ringleader, died of a single bullet wound in an apparent double suicide.
But not so fast. From windows in the prison hospital, several inmates were watching Carrasco's escape attempt. They said he and his accomplice, Rudy Dominguez, were executed in cold blood. And the witnesses had backup: a second autopsy.
An autopsy report revealed today that Fred Gómez Carrasco was shot and killed by law officers and did not commit suicide, as had been reported earlier.
The revelation scrambled what everyone thought they knew about the final shootout.
A grand jury started an inquiry to determine what happened. The governor called for a special court of public inquiry in the face of charges that prison officials murdered Carrasco and Dominguez after they were disarmed. The surviving gunman, Ignacio Cuevas, is waiting for trial, and the public is still waiting for the full, complete story of what actually happened that August night in the final minutes of the nation's longest prison siege.
The local justice of the peace, the guy who originally said that Carrasco committed suicide, now revised his statement just a little. Here's how he threaded the needle. I never said directly that they shot themselves. I said suicide. And just by them coming out of that building would be suicide. In other words, death by cop. Carrasco was shot once in the head, and Dominguez was shot 3 times. Twice in the head and once in the neck. The first medical examiner to look over Carrasco's body said he was struck at extremely close range, just 4 to 12 inches. The second medical examiner said he was shot by a distant, high-powered rifle. Basically, a sniper's bullet. Adding to the confusion, a state of Texas ballistics expert, said bullet fragments found in Carrasco's brain were from his own weapon. But then, the public inquiries, the investigations to get down to the bottom of how Carrasco died, were put on hold. Texas top law enforcement officials said they would interfere with court cases against Carrasco's accomplice, Ignacio Cuevas, who'd survived the shootout and now faced the death penalty for his role in the prison siege. 3 years later, people were still pushing for those inquiries, for answers. State Representative Joel Hernandez from San Antonio put it this way: "We were promised a court of inquiry would be created to investigate the entire matter from San Antonio to Huntsville. After more than 2 years of delay, the promised court has not been convened, and apparently the matter has been bypassed and minimized by state authorities." Did the government just move on? Was there some kind of cover-up? Well, it's been almost half a century. I guess we'll keep waiting. There was one other great mystery. Where was Rosa?
We were all in Mexico. Because remember, my mom was facing the death penalty.
Rosa had been charged as an accomplice in her husband's escape attempt. She was on the lam. And she needed the money to keep rolling in.
Well, she sold drugs for him still, kept up her part of the business. We were always running. She lost everything. So we go from living in this beautiful mansion, having, 6 maids, and then from there we ended up homeless.
That's next time. Rosa's incredible journey and how Fred's violent legacy really transformed San Antonio in a surprising way. In the final episode of Standoff. Standoff is a production of Imperative Entertainment. It was written and created by me, Wes Ferguson. Executive producer and story editor is Jason Hoke. Audio editing and sound engineering by Shane Freeman and Jason Hoke. Original score for Standoff by Max Baca, with additional music from Flaco Jimenez on accordion. Music engineering by Tony Gonzalez. Our main theme, Huntsville, is performed by Ray Benson and was originally released on the Merle Haggard and the Strangers 1971 album, Someday We'll Look Back. Cover art and design by Gina Sullivan. Carrasco audio tapes from the Texas Department of Corrections, courtesy of the Texas State Library and Archives Commission. Special thanks to the staff of the Texas Prison Museum for their generous help with research materials. The corridos, La Muerte de Fred Gómez Carrasco, El Nuevo Corrido de Fred Gómez Carrasco, El Corrido de Rosa Carrasco, and El Corrido de Alfredo Carrasco are published by San Antonio Music Publishers Incorporated and are courtesy of DLB Records. Special thanks to Eastside Music Studios in Austin, Texas. Have questions? Contact us at podcasts@imperativeentertainment.com. If you love the show, tell your friends, and don't forget to leave us a review. Thanks for listening. San Antonio writer Greg Barrios passed away during the production of this podcast, as did William T. Harper, author of 11 Days in Hell. I hope this show honors their memory.
Rumores, corren rumores que yo no sé si es verdad. Dicen que a Rosa Carrasco la mató la federal. Desde que murió Carrasco la sigue la policía. Buscando la noche y día. La acusan de haber metido las armas a la prisión para salvar a Carrasco cuando aquella matazón. Es que hace que a varios meses la vieron por la frontera. Ojalá que sean rumores lo que les estoy contando, porque hay una pobre madre que se quedaría llorando. Rosa llevaba por nombre, Carrasco fue su apellido. Era de Maldona, Texas, pueblito muy conocido.
As promised, you're about to hear a preview from the new season of Disgraceland. While you're listening, follow Disgraceland wherever you get your podcast, or you can listen to all 10 seasons exclusively on Amazon Music.
Ringo Starr, targeted by trigger-happy extremists. Britney Spears, in captivity under a 13-year conservatorship. Charles Manson, making the music industry witchy. The Sex Pistols attacking the status quo and drawing blood. Mama Cass at the center of the crime of the century. Chris Brown surrounded by a SWAT team. Jennifer Hudson tortured by a triple homicide. Robert Johnson a hellhound on his trail. And Pink Floyd's Crazy Diamond lost somewhere on the dark side. Hear all these insane true stories in Season 10 of Disgraceland. This is not the music history you've heard before. This is an uncensored, immersive look at the lives and true crimes of musical icons. Disgraceland is hosted by me, Jake Brennan, and is the world's first music and true crime podcast. Named 2021's Best Music Podcast by the Webby Awards. You can hear new episodes of Season 10 every Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts. Or you can hear the full archive. That's 10 seasons, over 100 episodes, all for free, exclusively at Amazon Music by going to amazon.com/Disgraceland. And then, buckle up for more of the most mind-blowing moments in music history. Listen to new episodes of Disgraceland wherever you get your podcasts. Rock-a-rolla.